Lesson 8.1, Angle Relationships. Our essential question for today's video is how can you use angle relationships to solve problems? We have 5 vocabulary terms: congruent angles, vertical angles, adjacent angles, complementary angles, and supplementary angles. And we're going to use what we know about these angle relationships to find measures. The first thing we're going to look for is a pair of vertical angles. So looking at our definition and what we've discussed, vertical angles happen when we have two intersecting lines. So looking in the diagram, I see two intersecting lines. I've got two straight lines. I have line C, E, D, and I have line A, E, B. And these two are intersecting lines, and they intersect at point E. So the two angles that form are angle CEA and angle DEB. So my pair of angles I have listed like this: CEA and DEB. Now we have adjacent angles, and adjacent angles, happen when we have two angles that share a vertex, so that center point, and they also share a side. So these two angles right here, AEC and CEF, share a side. They share the side CE. So these two angles are adjacent. So I'm going to list them as CEA and CEF. Now I have to look for complementary angles. And remember, as we've talked about in class, complementary, the letter C comes before supplementary, the letter S. Complementary is 90, supplementary is 180 degrees. So complementary angles, we're looking for two angles that combine to make 90 degrees. So we know that this mark right here at point E represents 90 degrees. So the angle FED must also be 90. So these two angles here, angles with a measure of 60 degrees and the angle with a measure of X degrees, these two must be complementary. So to list them out, I've got angle FEB and angle DEB. These two angles are complementary. We also have supplementary angles, which, as we discussed, have a sum of 180 degrees. So with a sum of 180 degrees, we're looking for two angles that can combine to make a straight line. So angle AEB is a straight line. So I'm going to look for two angles. So I'm going to take this larger angle, angle AEF, this angle right here, and angle FEB. And these two angles are supplementary. So to list them out, I've got angle AEF and angle FEB. Together, their sum is 180 degrees. Now we need to find the measure of AED. So this is where we really rely on what we know about these angle relationships. So to locate measure AED, or the angle AED, that is right here. Angle AED, that's this larger angle. So we know that AEB, 180 degrees, it's that straight line. But then we also have this smaller angle here, this measure angle X. Well, how do we use what we know about that angle to help us to figure out the measure of angle AED? This is where we rely on those complementary angles. We said that angle FEB and DEB were complementary because they had a sum of 90 degrees. So if we know that one of the angles is 60, well, we know that 60 plus 30 is 90. So angle X is really 30 degrees. So if this is 30 degrees, then the whole thing has to be 180. So this measure, angle AED, has to be the difference of 180 and 30, which tells me that angle AED has a measure of 150 degrees. Let me quickly erase this for you. There we go. Now we can look for finding the measure of CEA. So measure CEA, that is this smaller angle right here, this angle right here. So thinking about vertical angles, we know that this angle is 30 degrees, and we already had them listed as CEA and DEB being vertical. And if we think back to our vocabulary term about what vertical angles mean, vertical angles right here, it states that these angles have the same measure. So if we know that one angle has a measure of 30 degrees, we can conclude that the other angle has a measure of 30 degrees. So measure C, or angle CEA, has a measure of 30 degrees. So now, if we wanted to throw a little algebra into our geometry, we can use this diagram to write an equation for that missing value, which was listed as x in our diagram. We knew that complementary angles had a sum of 90 degrees, so if I use that information, I would say that my 60-degree angle plus my angle with a measure of x degrees is equal to 90 degrees. And how I'd solve for x, I need to subtract 60 from both sides. Therefore, x is equal to 30. And our second example in this video is how do we use these angle pairs to write a two-step equation. So we just finished writing a one-step equation. Now we're going to write a two-step equation, which can be used to help us find the measure of particular angles. So we have the angle UST, which here is this straight line. So a straight line has a measure of 180 degrees. So now we're going to use this information here to find this measure RST, which is right here. So we're going to find this. We do not know the measure of this angle right here. So we're going to use what we know to find that. So the measure of RST plus USR is equal to 180 degrees. So now here we have the measure of RST and USR. So, alrighty, I'm sorry. So we have RST and USR. So we're going to plug in the information that we do know. So for RST, the information we are given is that it is 3x. And we know that the sum is 180, so we're going to add the measure of RST, 3x, to USR, which is 36. And because it is a straight line, or therefore supplementary angles, it is equal to 180 degrees. So we see here I just have a two-step equation. 3x plus 36 equals 180. So I need to solve by subtracting 36 from 180. So I now have 3x equals 144. And then I need to divide by 3. And I find that x is equal to 48. So x is equal to 48. But the whole angle has a sum, or has a measure of 3x. So if x is 48, I need to figure out what 3 times 48 is, which is, back in our equation, we found 3x is 144 degrees. So if we check our math, we will see if 3x is 144 degrees, so that is the angle, or the measure of angle RST, 140 degrees. And if we check it, we should see that 144 plus 36 is equal to 180 degrees. Therefore, we have successfully solved for x and found the measure of RST. Now what I'd like you to do is try these your turn questions on your own. Remember what to do if you have any questions. You can always mark them down on your paper, email them, do whatever you need to do to get the questions answered and the help that you need. Good luck on this, and remember to refer to that note card that has your vocabulary terms as well as the diagram of your vocabulary words.